Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sirius Report. It is interesting that Greenland is back in the news, but for many, many other reasons. We're talking about where the U.S. goes to Greenland and gets rejected, while at the same time, a new partner is coming onto the scene. Paul, I want to thank you as always for being a part of the discussion. And what's some of the really fascinating news that's coming out in regards to especially Vance's trip, where he was pretty much summarily left on the red carpet, and Greenland has appears to have nothing it wants to do with the U.S.
Well, first off, thanks for joining as well, Ken. Always a pleasure. Yeah, look, there's been this big story going on for a couple of months, really, since Trump was elected, where he made a lot of very high octane comments about, first of all, I'm going to buy Greenland, then I'm going to seize control of Greenland. And clearly this has upset a lot of the Greenlanders, all 56,000 of them. Remember, it's got a very small population. And we know, I can't remember which Trump it was who went and paid a visit a month or two ago. And people read too much into it. And it wasn't really a visit or anything other than just, oh, we've turned up in Greenland and we'll let people put two and two together and make 52. And I know there's a lot of Americans who sit there thinking that it's a foregone conclusion that the United States is going to get its hands on Greenland. Well, Vance has made this visit, and it's memorable or notable for a number of reasons. First, let's deal with an interview he gave because he visited a military base in northern Greenland that belongs to the United States. I don't think people are aware the US already has a military presence there because it's part of NATO. And yes, geographically speaking, Greenland's a lot closer to the United States than Europe is, ironically. But he came out and made these statements and was effectively asked to comment on Trump's claims that we're going to take control of Greenland or Greenland's ours or something like that. And he absolutely backtracked on those claims. He actually made it in reference to the fact that they felt, the United States that is, that Greenland's security was not being administered properly by Denmark. Of course, Greenland belongs to Denmark. And they felt that the United States was in a far better position to be able to protect Greenland than anyone else. And he made out that that was what Trump was referring to. Well, from as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't the case. And I think, though, Vance is trying to repair damage that Trump's comments have caused. And in that regard, I would applaud him for doing so. Of course, Vance did make reference to this ongoing ridiculous assertion that China and Russia have designs on trying to control Greenland. In no way, shape, or form do they have any interest whatsoever in Greenland. Why would China want to have a military stronghold on the wrong side of the United States to do what with the United States? Is absolutely meaningless. They don't need to, they don't want to. And then, as far as Russia goes, why is Russia going to be looking again to be isolated on the wrong side of North America from Russia itself and launch some kind of military attack or military strike on the United States or Canada, for argument's sake? Again, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's no way they would do that in any way, shape, or form. So that just makes a complete myth of that. And also, often people forget how close the east of Russia is to Alaska. The Bering Strait's not very wide. Was it 25 miles, something like that? So again, that's just one of those mythical ideas that tries to justify why the United States needs to take a stronger hold in terms of the security of Greenland. Vance didn't make any reference to rare earths and other alleged stories about all this mineral wealth that exists in Greenland, and we've talked about that previously. There's no evidence to support it. There's a lot of claims. And there's an awful lot of work that would need to be done to prove up anything there other than what's currently being mined. There aren't that many mining operations underway there. So I think for me, that was the first point to make, because clearly Vance saw this as a damage limitation exercise in terms of Trump's very high octane language. I mean, it was totally unnecessary to say that, because not only did it infuriate the Europeans, and you could say, well, who cares what the Europeans think? But more importantly, it infuriated the Greenlanders. And I'll give way to you, Ken, because then I think we can go on to what happened during Vance's trip.
Yeah, one of the more fascinating things that I saw coming out of this and popped in my mind, I tweeted about it a little bit later, was when Vance said that Denmark and Europe has not treated Greenland and developed it very well. Well, first thing that popped in my head is, well, what about Puerto Rico there, United States? It's one of the most impoverished territories around. You've done nothing or very little. As a matter of fact, they've done so little that more often than not, the citizens of Puerto Rico end up immigrating to the United States proper. So, and when you get back to what you said, why there was a base in the past, well, during the Cold War, they used Greenland for something they called the DEW line, DEW, and it was a way to have 24-hour surveillance for the potential of any ICBMs that might come over the Arctic Circle in towards the United States. That's no longer necessary. Satellite technology and satellite reporting or monitoring is far greater and makes the DEW line obsolete. So really, that base that's been there has just had no real purpose. It's just been the United States has had access to a territory, probably similar to many other installations around the world, that they just use it symbolically that they are in the region. And every once in a while, like Diego Garcia, they'll send over some B-2s and say, okay, we're ready for some type of mission. But with that being said, the several times that the United States has gone over to Greenland over the last number of weeks, they haven't been invited. They just, hey, we're going to go over there and you're going to have to deal with it. And is it any wonder that the people of Greenland are sick and tired of the U.S. getting involved in their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. And where the lies kind of, as much as anything, is for me, to blind the US population to reality, because there was principally Trump was claiming that both the Greenland government and its people wanted to be part of the United States. The reality is, every member of Greenland's parliament disagrees with this assertion, and something like 90 odd percent of the people of Greenland also disagree with that assertion. Now, there's a new government coming in Greenland, who obviously they're part of the Greenland Parliament, so the government itself doesn't agree with this. And you're right, there is quite a few visits being made to Greenland, not via any invitation. They just roll up going, well, we're here. And Vance flies to Greenland, presumably as much as anything on one of these face-saving missions, spends time on this US military base in the north of the country. That's where there was this interview. I didn't necessarily see all of it. By all accounts, he was supposed to have all these other events to attend in Greenland over a number of days. They were all cancelled because nobody wanted the United States to be there. There were also claims that Vance was seeking a photo shoot with people in Greenland, and no one agreed to do so. Now, I mean, so clearly this is a very, well, basically damning indictment that they don't want the Americans there. They're not interested in having the Americans there. in any way, shape, or form, because I think they then would perceive themselves to be more of a legitimate target than if the United States keeps this very low key presence there. They don't have a problem with that because that's been the case for decades. So it's like rather like what Finland should have done, and Sweden: stay neutral, stay out of the risks of being part of an alliance is. Now, okay, it's a bit different because technically Greenland is part of NATO because Denmark is. But in reality, they just get left alone. No one's going to interfere with them. And as I said, nobody, the Russians or the Chinese, is going to try and put a military base there and launch some kind of attack on the United States with, I mean, that is not going to fly. It wouldn't work. And it would be extinguished rapidly and serve absolutely zero purpose. Yes, I said that earlier, but I'm reiterating it to make a very important point. So basically, Vance's trip was a complete flop on every single level. It was supposed to be, I do think, face saving, but also a PR exercise. And it just bombed completely. And it totally, of course, appends all the comments Trump's made, which actually his statements about that, and then making statements like we're going to have Greenland, really infuriated the people there. And then on the back of that, when all that's going on, statements came out from the Greenland government where its foreign minister said that a priority for the new government was to, quote, deepen ties with China, because officials from Greenland who visited China previously have spoken very highly of the country. They want to boost cooperation and trade. They want Chinese investment. So, how soon before a contingent of Greenland ministers head off to China, the world's going to see them paying a visit to China? They're not seeing any of these foreign ministers paying a visit to the United States and making similar statements. And there's no doubt this was said to make a point to the United States is we're not here for you to come in an asset strip and steal whatever you think from this country, whatever you think is here or isn't here. We'll decide because we're autonomous. And that was the other thing Vance said. He was very keen to say, well, they're autonomous and they get to make their own decisions. Well, yes. So if they're not interested in the United States having any presence there, then the United States should, and I say should because it probably will try not to, basically acquiesce to their wishes and go, okay, fine. If you don't want to see, you don't want to see it. But there's no doubt they want investment. They want to develop certain things, and it might in the island. I mean, it's certainly, if it has any aspirations to develop what assets it may potentially have, it needs far more infrastructure put in place for that to happen. It's basically got virtually no roads in the entire country. A lot of it, of course, is impassable because of permanent tundra. So, yeah, they clearly want to develop the country, but they want to develop it on the basis of how they want to do it. And I think the timing of this, which came at the same time as Vance's visit there, is just a very damning indictment. And frankly, it's humiliating for the United States on the one hand. But what makes the matter even worse for the United States is Greenland's publicly going out, going, we want to deepen ties with one of the countries, namely China, excuse me, who the United States has has got designs on the country, which of course they haven't, which is frankly just ridiculous. And again, it's one of those things where the United States has scored a major own goal. I'll just mute for a second, okay, Ken?
Yep, get a drink of water there. Yeah, the interesting thing when you take a look at what the U.S. has done is, you know, Trump's policy going back to 2016 has been one of escalate to de-escalate, make outlandish claims, make bombastic attacks, such as, if we're gonna tariff you to death unless you do what we want, want us to do. In some cases, with smaller nations, that sort of works, but it doesn't necessarily, especially now that the U.S. is driving a wedge between Europe and itself. It's driving a wedge between Canada and itself. And, to me, I don't see Greenland necessarily. I think there's an ulterior motive. And just this is my opinion on this. It's not about protecting itself from any Russian influence or attack coming from the Arctic. It's more about, and it's not about the resources either. It's about, if you take a look, the United States has limited entryways into developing the Arctic, which it wants to do. It has Alaska, but it really doesn't have too much else. So Greenland would be its portal to be able to, like Russia has done, and Russia has done in partnership with China, have access to try to develop, whatever it deems necessary in the Arctic. So, that flaunted northwest or northeast passage or something like that. That's what I see, going along these lines. But the problem is that this time around, Trump is making, I don't want to say enemies, but he's pissing off so many different nations, so many different leaders that they really don't want to do business with them. And, I think we're going to see that where the United States is going to very quickly become isolated due to these policies.
Yeah, it's a great point and an extremely important one. And I think you're absolutely right about the designs they have on the Arctic. But the stupid part about that is Russia's made its position very clear to the United States. It's prepared to work with them. It's prepared to give the United States access on Russian soil to assets there that they can co-develop. They've given them incentives to do the right thing. And instead of grabbing those with both hands, going, okay, we can profit hugely from this in a win-win cooperation, they go, no, we want it all. So we're going to want to have control over our dominion, meaning Greenland. And therefore that we can stake a claim on the basis of the Arctic, because Russia and China have, and I've talked about this myself for years, have big ideas and big plans for the Arctic, not least through the Northern Sea route and all the developments that you will see off Northern Siberia. The work planned in the next 10, 20, 30 years for Siberia is just breathtaking. It's huge development with enormous amounts of Chinese investment as well. So, the US sees this. Instead of going, well, we'd like a piece of that pie, they go kind of claim they do and then go off and threaten another nation. And it's probably, as much as anything, why Trump came out with all those very ill-advised comments about Canada. And people went, oh, yeah, he's just going to take Canada. And notice Mark Carney, who came out and went, the relationship is long-standing relationship between the United States and Canada is now over. He said, what the United States thinks is going to happen, we don't know. But as far as we're concerned, we're going to do what we want to do. And, they risk this isolation. They risk that they'll throw Canada into the arms of the Russians and the Chinese and the Belt and Road and Asia. I mean, if they build the infrastructure, they can share plenty of energy to Asia. Or so Canada can become more autonomous. I'm not suggesting it necessarily will do or how quickly that will happen. But that's what happens again when you hurl these kind of ridiculous comments, as Trump did about Canada, and not actually understanding the consequences of making those statements. Because if Carney says that, I'm sure he means it. So what does that mean in the future for the US and Canada's relations and exports from Canada to the United States, etc.? Canada could make life very difficult for the United States if they made sudden, abrupt changes in policy. Okay, they're not likely to do that because they're going to have to build a lot of infrastructure to support exporting energy that they may have shipped or used to transport to the United States instead. But it's just the principle. And Canada's a great example of this. And obviously, Greenland's another example of this. And really, they need to walk away from these ideas. And if they want to improve relations with both nations, do it on a win-win cooperation and talk about how they can both benefit from it rather than going, Canada's going to be the 51st state. No, Greenland is going to be the 51st state. No, in fact, one's the 51st state and the other one's the 52nd state. And making these kind of comments that Trump thinks scares these countries, and it doesn't. It just causes antagonism. And the US needs to stop and upsetting even its traditional allies, although, okay, allies might be said in the looser sense of the word because the US doesn't really have allies, but the principle stands, and that's a huge problem. So you're absolutely right talking about Alaska. And sorry about, the Arctic and the United States is designs on that region.
Yeah, a quick side note in regards to Canada. This is, in my opinion, is where Trump absolutely lost the verb when it comes to reading the room. Carney is an instrument of the EU and the EU oligarchy. So now all of a sudden, instead of working with Trudeau, who was in my opinion, a moronic clown and easily could be run over, you now have where there's a division between the U.S. and Europe, whether it's regard to NATO, the EU, trade, etc. And now Canada is, at least temporarily, being run by an instrument of the EU, which is going to negotiate from Canada with the United States under the mindset of the EU. So, that's where I think he's really missing the boat and could very, very quickly throw decades of partnership and brotherhood with the nation to the north out the window because he just doesn't understand the dynamics of how politics is going right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, any other final
No,
comments you
no,
have
I
on
think
this?
no, that's fine.
I think we covered quite a bit, especially topics such as Greenland. Paul, as always, I want to thank you for being a part of this discussion and for all of your insights.
Yes, and likewise.
And to everybody here at the Sirius Report community, thank you for all of your support. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, send this out to anybody you think it might be important to. And until the next time we get together, have a great day.